Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representatives Corey Malloy and Andrew Stoddard. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start off with the massacre we saw play out in Buffalo, New York. We saw the president come out once again calling for an assault on, a ban on assault weapons, I should say. Knowing it's going to be an uphill battle, he says, but he's determined to get it done. Andrew, let's start with you. Your thoughts on the president's call?
Yeah, I think it's a great call. I do agree that it's an uphill battle, and I think we need to do something. You know, I don't know if a ban is the right answer, but I think there's obviously things we can do. The shooting in Buffalo showed us that we've got issues with guns that are purchased legally with people who have questionable backgrounds, and so I think something needs to be done.
So when you put it that way, the red flag laws come to mind. Is that what you're talking about?
You know, I think that's one thing that's shown to be very successful when used right. I think there's a lot of middle ground, and we just need to work to find it.
Okay. Representative Malloy, your thoughts on the president's call?
Well, I think it's a typical Biden administration call. You never want a terrible event like this to go wasted, and so every time these things happen, the gun ban control discussion comes right back out from the administration, and I think we need to look beyond gun control and look at some of the real problems. You know, I think we should look at some of the things that have happened in Buffalo. We have Aaron Salter, who had a gun legally, who gave his life to try and save the lives of other people, including himself. So, you know, we can talk about gun control all we want. And we can talk about the Second Amendment all we want, and I don't think the two are ever going to come together real closely, but we can always look at what we can do to stop this violence. This kind of violence is unacceptable. It truly is unacceptable, and we need to realize that when bad people do bad things like this, that we can't. It's not acceptable. And if anybody thinks that gun owners and people who support the Second Amendment approve of these kinds of things, they're absolutely wrong. In fact, one of the things that is very, very important to understand is that the Second Amendment is one of the ways that we can protect ourselves. We can protect ourselves with self-defense. And that's a choice. People have a choice to either have a firearm or not have a firearm, and that's their choice.
So, Representative, let me ask you this. You bring up the hero who stood up with a gun and fired a few shots, but he was badly outmanned, for lack of a better term, when you're talking about an AR versus a pistol. So along the lines of an assault rifle, do you see any steps that need to be taken?
Well, an assault rifle is a rifle. And there's lots of different kinds of rifles. There's lots of different kinds of calibers. Nobody ever talks about a mini Ruger that shoots the same round as an AR-15. And so, you know, there's just a lot of different things that need to be factored in and thought about. You know, I have two AR-15s. They've never hurt anybody. I take them out and target shoot them. And certainly any firearm is going to hurt people if it's used in the hands of bad people.
Mm-hmm. Representative Stoddard, that is an argument we hear often when we talk about this. What do you make of that? It's not the gun, it's the person.
You know, I think there's a little bit of both on that. I think that, you know, this is an issue where people generally retreat to their sides, and I don't think that's a good way to handle it. People get really frustrated, call for a ban. The other side says no restrictions, and then nothing gets done. And, you know, I think it's something we can look at, you know, access to weapons. You know, we regulate tobacco, drugs, alcohol so much. I think, you know, we've have hundreds of years of precedence of some sort of firearm restrictions being put in place, and I think we can start to look at more.
Representative Malloy, what are some solutions when you talk about we do need to do something about this if it's not a weapons ban?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and I think you've seen legislators work on these things together. My good colleague here, Representative Stoddard, we have both worked together. I think we both see the violence. We really want to see an end of violence, but how do you do it in a way that protects people, stops the violence, and still maintains those rights that we all have as Americans? And so we've worked on things together. We've both done great bills that go in this direction.
So for example, what are some of those bills?
Well, we were, one of the bills that I did was the Safe Harbor bill, and I think Representative Stoddard even voted for that bill. And it's a great bill. It gives people an opportunity to voluntarily remove firearms from their home. And if there's a situation where there's stress, there's a potential danger, and I think to remove them from their home and have law enforcement hold them for safe storage. With no questions asked, there's no requirement, they're not forced to do this, they do it voluntarily. But it gives people options. In that kind of scenario, if it were in my home, I would probably call on a trusted friend or family member to do that, which is also another good option. But the Safe Harbor law allows people to do that if they don't have those kind of options.
Okay. In this case, highly unlikely that this suspect would have done that. Representative Stoddard, your thoughts on, you've already talked about some things that need to be done, but is a safe harbor issue enough, or does it need to go further?
I mean, I think that's a great starting point, and as Representative Malloy mentioned, we have worked on gun violence bills together that have been productive and that, you know, have the data behind them to show that they do work. You know, this situation we're talking about, there were red flags in school, there were threats made. I think there was a lot there that should have stayed on a record to make sure that, you know, when this individual went to purchase a firearm, that they knew that this was going on. And, you know, I don't know where to draw the line on that or how to do it, but I think it's something we need to look at.
Let's move into another issue from this incident, and that is radicalization. We've learned from documents that this suspect posted that he had a clear motive in carrying this out. Representative Malloy, what is causing the radicalization of younger Americans?
Well, if I had the answers, I'd probably make a lot more money. I don't know, but I don't know the answers. I don't know that a lot of people know the answers, but it is a huge problem, and it's another one of those things, in my opinion, that you know, you can pretty much, you have the right to think what you want to think, and in most cases to say what you want to say, but when your rights are used to infringe upon the other people's rights, then those rights end. So we also need to remember that whatever caused this guy to this lunatic to do this action in Buffalo and other areas, that we don't always know exactly what's influenced him, but the final decision was his and his alone. And we need to remember that he's the criminal, he's the murderer, and that he needs to be responsible for those murders. And he needs to be held responsible. To start blaming everybody else, everything else, and find problems beyond his choice to make that terrible choice is something we need to also consider.
Representative Stoddard, your thoughts on how, I said young people, but it goes beyond that even, but the radicalization here in the U.S.
Yeah, and I think that's become a huge problem since, you know, we have all these internet boards and places where these ideas can get shared more openly. You know, this is an example of extremism that has unfortunately crept its way into the far-right belief system, and I think we need people to call it out when they see it. You know, this isn't something that we can let get mainstreamed. That's why it's good for us to have as many voices as possible. You know, we want to make sure that we have a political system that can be respectful, that can have good discourse. People can be passionate, but we want to make sure that we're a good marketplace of ideas so that the majority can support the good ones. And you know, I don't know the answer on how to make sure that we're not radicalizing these people, but it's something that we need to call out.
Okay, I have about 30 seconds left. Representative Malloy, do you see any solutions that could be on the table here?
I think we need to really work hard to find the solutions, and I think it starts with us individually. Okay. We need to really look inside, and we need to look at how we can appreciate everybody that we interact with.
All right. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it on that note. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. I hate to have this conversation, but here we are once again. Thanks for your time. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more.